All right, guys, welcome to the latest episode of Blood Money. Today we have a very special guest, Scott Bryson. How you doing, sir?
Hey, good, Vim. How are you?
Good to have you on Blood Money, brother. So Scott is a former Secret Service agent, and we actually did an interview. He conducted an interview with me on his podcast. What's the name of your podcast, by the way, Scott? Again?
Yeah, it's Scott Bryson, Beyond the Service.
Beyond the Surface, yeah, service. So, I'm sure you got some amazing stories to tell. So, why don't we just get into? Tell us a little bit, firstly, about your background, who you work with, and then I'll fire off some questions.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from North Carolina. You could probably tell by the way I sound. Lived all over the world, but I never lost my accent. Went to school at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. Played football up there for a few years. Kind of got tired of getting beat up, so I gave that up because I know it wasn't good enough to go pro. Uh, Got into law enforcement after I graduated from high school. I was a city police officer for 2 years. Then I went to the Secret Service for 25 years. And I'm still in law enforcement now, but I'm not at liberty to say where I work, which is totally fine. So I've been a cop, active duty cop for like 30 years. Secret Service career started in 1997. I was stationed in the Charlotte field office. After some time there, about 5 years and some change, I got transferred to DC, where I was on Presidential Protective Division with George W. Bush. Did that for right at 6 years. 3 of those years, I was on the counter assault team, which is basically a Secret Service version of a SWAT team, I guess is about the best way to describe it. From there, I had the privilege of going and serving overseas. I lived in London, England for 3.5 years. Came back to DC, spent 4.5 years in our surveillance unit, which I really enjoyed. And then from there, I got promoted, went back to the president's detail. This time, Trump was in office. I ran Eric Trump's detail in New York City for 15 months. Then I went back to DC, ran the surveillance unit that I had been a part of earlier. This time I ran it as the supervisor for a year. Then I ran the JOC, which is the Joint Operations Center for the White House. And I can talk a little bit about that. From there, I went to Hawaii and ran our investigative division out of the Honolulu field office. And then from there, I went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and then I retired.
Wow. So tell me, like, are you at liberty? You work with George W. For one. Are you at liberty to discuss your experiences with some of these key, well-known personalities?
Yeah, I can talk about some things for sure. Yeah, I can.
Tell me about working with George W. What you saw there. I mean, I'm curious.
Yeah, Bush. At the time, I'm a conservative Christian. Okay, so I'm a right-leaning guy anyway, but morally and ethically or whatever. But back in the day, I was a big Bush guy. The one thing I would say about Secret Service agents, though, this is kind of I want to give a shout out to the men and women that work there. Secret Service agents are pretty good at compartmentalizing because I have a lot of friends that are liberal. It's just the way it is. I'd say 50% are Republican, 50% are Democrats. Just the way it works. So the guys are really good about compartmentalizing and going to work and kind of checking their ego and checking their political beliefs at the door and then protecting the leader of the free world. So, having said that, I was fortunate because I happened to be protecting a guy that I think I liked at the time. Looking back on it, I was like, oh, I'm not sure the WMD stuff was real. And I didn't realize Cheney was such a war hawk and all that stuff. But you live and learn. But I did enjoy being around him. He's an extremely competitive guy. I would argue he's probably the most fit president we've had in our lifetime. I know Obama got a lot of credit for being the fittest president because he's thin. By the way, he smokes, which is whatever, but that's why he's thin. It's not because he's a big athlete. Bush. Bush was an avid runner. For those that don't know, when he was the governor of Texas, he was a big alcoholic. And on his 40th birthday, he had an epiphany and he stopped drinking completely. And he used to run. He got really good at running because he would run. He would sweat the alcohol out of his system from the night before. And that's why he was a really good runner. And I had to work really hard at running because I was not ever a good runner. He was running 7-minute miles. And so I got to the point where I could do that, but I didn't feel like I could fight my way out of a wet paper bag. So I didn't like the cardio so much, but I did do it. Guy's extremely fit, extremely competitive. His ranch down in Crawford, Texas, is about 1,600 acres, and he would go down there. And after his knees got bad, he would start mountain biking. He was a very, like I said, he's a very fit, outdoorsy type guy, and he'd like to run the chainsaw and do all this stuff that I was, as a young age, and I was a little surprised that we allowed him to do, but we did. And he'd run the chainsaw and cut wood, just be a regular guy down there. And he would mountain bike a lot, and I would mountain bike with him, and that was also hard, but not quite as hard as the running. Like I said, he was very fit. So, the guy was probably close to 30 years my senior, and I was not going to let him, outdo me, but he was very, very competitive, a little bit of a ball buster, which I liked because, like I said, I played college football and I've been in law enforcement for a long time, and kind of just like that, just that bravado, that man's man. Just, whether you agree with him politically or not is fine, but I really enjoyed being around guy. Like, he just seemed like an average guy for a guy who's a lot of money, went to Yale or whatever. He liked to do normal dude things, and I just enjoyed that.
So, we all have questions about that particular administration because of the whole Iraq thing, the housing crisis. I mean, it was quite a turbulent time, 9/11, a lot of, questions that have come up on our podcast about 9/11. Personality wise, tell me, I mean, were you around Dick Cheney as well? Obviously around W, what are the things you could say about, what you observed in terms of, other than him being a man's man and, seems like he was very fit. What else could you tell us about him?
Well, yeah, to answer your first question, I was assigned to Presidential Protective Division. So when you're a Secret Service agent, you start in the field, you're a phase 1 guy, you do investigations. Phase 2 part of your career is full-time protection. So you get sent to a former or the president or the vice president. So I got stationed on the president's detail. So no, I never really worked Dick Cheney because he had his own detail. But a funny story about him, one day I was in the West Wing getting something to eat, or in between, we call it pushes, like when you have to stand post, we call it ring around the oval because there's posts that you have to stand. And most days are pretty boring. When you travel outside of D.C., those are fun. The trips are fun. But if you're going to report to the White House every day, it's kind of monotonous. We call it ring around the oval. And so in between pushes, you might get a bathroom break or chance to check email or get something to eat. And I went to the West Wing restroom and ended up washing my hands. I was standing at the sink washing my hands, and Dick Cheney came out of the stall, and we didn't speak, of course, but that was the only time I was really kind of near Cheney. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. I bumped into the VP in the bathroom, a little bit weird. But, I didn't really know much about Cheney then, but I would say about Bush, extremely hard work ethic, really good work ethic. Prior to going to his detail full time, I was assigned to Andy Card. Andy Card was his chief of staff, and Condoleezza Rice was his national security advisor. And they also had protection. So for almost a year, I protected Andy Card. And we had to actually move our push. We call it pushes, like your shift changes. We call it push. Your push times got changed because Bush would be in the Oval about 6 o'clock every morning. Well, shift change was at 6, 2, and 10. So we would have to get to work about 5 in the morning because Andy Card wanted to beat him to the Oval. So Andy would get to the White House about 5:30. So we had to be at work at 5. So one of the things I definitely remember about Bush was a strong work ethic. I can remember those early mornings, especially in the wintertime, walking him over, had a nice fire going in the Oval. Just some really good memories of interacting with him early in the morning. Of course, as the day unfolded, he got busy doing his thing and we weren't in there with him. But never really heard any, classified conversations. I was not I'm sure the limousine drivers probably heard more than I did, and the detail leader. But I was on the counter assault team, so I was in a different capacity most of that time. So I didn't hear any top secret conversations. But I was standing outside the Oval one day when the Delta guys came in. They had they brought him, I think it was Saddam Hussein's, was it a Glock? I think they brought him Saddam Hussein's Glock or a big K-bar knife. I can't remember. But I was standing outside the Oval when those guys came in, and that was pretty cool.
Wow, wow. Because if you look at what the mainstream media made George W. Bush out to be, I mean, they kind of represent him as like a lazy person that Dick Cheney was really in charge, and like he wasn't very smart. But what you're saying is, I mean, again, countering the mainstream media narrative and the way they tried to portray him.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously Yale educated or whatever, but he's a Texas guy. And I think a lot of times I've experienced this too, and I might have a soft spot in my heart for him a little bit, just because I think people judge a book by its cover a lot of the times. And we do have snafus, and people, look at Biden, God love him. I mean, he couldn't even get out a sentence without tripping over himself. But and Dan Quayle, of course, got a bad rap for not knowing how to spell potato. But I mean, George Bush, it might sound a little funny because he's from Texas, but the guy, as far as I could tell, he was super smart. And whether he was the smartest guy in the room or not didn't matter, because you were not going to outwork him. The guy has a tremendous work ethic.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So tell me, after that, who'd you work with?
So, like I said, I spent 6 years with Bush. 3 of those years, I was in a suit and tie, clean shaven, going to work every day. It was called working the shift. So, traveling with him on Air Force One and all that fun stuff, the stuff you see in the movies. They don't show the midnights and the stairwells, they show the sexy stuff. But that was fun traveling. I always liked going on the road. Air Force One, that's not a bad way to travel. One of the things I never got tired of doing was getting on the helicopter when he would go to Andrews. And if it was a good weather call, which it was most of the time, you would fly from, you wouldn't motorcade, you would take the helicopters. So that flight never got old, coming across the Washington Mall there, flying by the Washington Monument, coming across the Capitol. I mean, I did that several times, and I kind of got chills every time I did it. You're flying in the most restricted airspace in America in a helicopter with the leader of the free world in the other helicopter. It's kind of a shell game, in case
Hmm.
someone's trying to shoot you down with a missile. They didn't know which one he was in, hopefully. Thankfully,
Hmm.
we never got shot at. But I mean, it was just that flight never got old. That was all. I was always enjoyed that.
You were saying something. You said midnight in the stairwell. Tell me, what does that mean? Midnight, like the midnight in the stairwell stuff.
Yeah. So especially well, protection's a full time gig, 24/7, 365. If a holiday exists, I've missed it, right? And that's just military is the same way, police the same thing. But it's a machine that never stops. You're protecting the leader of the free world in my case, or the VP, or the first or second family, whoever. So it's an assignment that doesn't stop. It's around the clock. And so what I was saying is, these movies are always showing the high speed, low drag stuff. But guess what? There's somebody somewhere standing in a stairwell at 3 a.m, trying to stay awake. And I can remember many times doing that when I was on the counter assault team, when I was with my guys in a hotel somewhere, perhaps, or even in the White House, uh, just trying to stay awake, trying to fight the sleep monkey. 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, it gets tough to stay awake. That's all I meant.
Is there so tell me a little bit about like anything dangerous, hairy situations, or was it pretty standard? I mean, was it pretty calm and peaceful?
Well, you want boring, right? So you definitely want boring, even though it makes for a long shift. But boring is good because you're not getting attacked. But I would say that when I was on the counter assault, well, let's see here. I've been to Afghanistan twice. Once on the counter assault team, I went with First Lady Laura Bush, and I got to work with SEAL Team 3. I think it was 3 or 8. I can't remember. Sorry, guys. But I worked with SEAL Team over there, and that was, I'd never been in the military, and I'd never been in a combat zone, so that was a little. I enjoyed it, but it got my attention. The hair on my neck stood up a couple times, but I felt really safe because I was with my guys and I was with the SEAL team. Didn't really feel, super scared. I mean, I was nervous, but I don't think I was super scared because we weren't, being shot at. But I felt comfortable because I was with a bunch of competent people. I will tell you, it was a little nerve wracking though. But I will tell you that the scaredest I've ever been, which is going to sound crazy because I've been to Afghanistan twice. The second time I went to Afghanistan, I went as a shift guy. It was during Bush's farewell tour in December of '08 when he got the shoes thrown at him in the press conference in was it Baghdad or somewhere over in Iraq?
I
I
believe
was
that
in,
was Baghdad. Yeah,
yeah,
Baghdad.
I was in Afghanistan. So he was supposed to come to Afghanistan first and then hit Iraq, but they flipped it for some reason, and he had the shoes and stuff thrown at him, which I want to tell a funny story about that in a second. But to answer your question, I was doing Karzai's Palace. I was the site agent for Karzai's Palace. And I was in country for like a week before we told. We were at a CIA compound in Kabul, and before we even told the Afghani people that we were there. And then I got dropped off alone over at Karzai's Palace I had 24 hours to put together a security plan. And of course, everybody over there had an AK-47, and all I had was my stupid pistol. But GRS was my QRF. So people don't know, GRS is the Global Response Staff. That's the guys you probably saw in the movie 13 Hours. That was my QRF. So that made me feel good because I had their radio. But it was a little unnerving to be in Afghanistan, kind of alone, surrounded by dudes with AKs. And again, a little bit of a novice, not being in the military. It's, I hate to say it, but like I didn't really trust anybody. I mean, you don't know who's good and who's bad. They're all wearing army fatigues and everybody's carrying an AK. And I just was hoping they were all good guys. And it turned out they were, but you never know with that type of stuff. But what I wanted to say, I wanted to go back and tell you about the scariest thing I ever did, I think. So Afghanistan twice, pretty cool experiences. But the scariest I think I've ever been was in Kingston, Jamaica. I was working in a 2-man element.
By the way, it's so funny you mentioned that, dude. I'm sorry to interrupt you because oh my God, it's crazy. Because, I was a music video director, and I got to mention this. And one of the scariest places I think I've ever been to in my life was Kingston, Jamaica. Sorry to interrupt you. It was an area called Tuvali Gardens, which is basically a region of Kingston, Jamaica, where the warlords, which is the gangsters, and these guys are brutal. I mean, you constantly see individuals walking around with an arm missing, and the reason their arm's missing is because the warlords cut it off because that dude stole something, right?
Yeah.
And it just brought me back to 2004 when I was out there directing reggae music videos, and literally the warlords, because there was no cops, the warlords were the ones protecting me, and I would have 4 dudes on one side, 4 dudes on the other side, literally walking me through town, because as a white boy, I'd be dead meat in that region. But anyway.
Yeah. No, it's funny you said the time frame. So I was on CAT from 04 to 07. So this was probably maybe like 06 frame. I'm not sure, 06, 07. So I was kind of a senior guy. And so this one other guy and I, of course, there was more than 2 of us, but on my shift, there were 2 guys, and we had a local cop counterpart. But we were with Jenna Bush, and I don't know if anybody remembers Jenna Bush running around the world working for UNICEF, doing her good deed stuff to help people. Anyway, one of the places that she went was Jamaica. And she also spent a lot of time, she lived in Panama. I did several rotations down in Panama, which was also a little bit shady, but not near as scary. But she was doing not Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer was doing, you could find it. I've looked for it before. I can't find it. It's somewhere on the internet. Diane Sawyer did one of her shows, behind the scenes, whatever it's called, with Jenna, and they decided to get this great idea to go down to a shanty town, which is probably what you're talking about, or something very similar to what you're talking about. Every single person down there was carrying a machete or an AK, and then you had most of the detail were Caucasian type looking dudes, and we rolled in there in like a 3 or 4 car motorcade with cameras and a bunch of white people, and my teammate was white, but our counterpart was a black guy from Jamaica, and he had like a 30-round clip in his freaking Glock. I'd never seen a magazine so long, but he had like a fully auto Glock pistol, which was pretty cool. But we were riding around, and he's like, "We shouldn't go down there." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're telling me." But we did, and of course, she had her shift out with the guys in the plain clothes, and then they had, my buddy John and I were in our tactical stuff. And I remember getting out of the car, because normally the CAT guys stay in the car. We don't get out unless there's something jumping off. And so I remember saying, "Oh no, well, if I get killed, I'm not going to get killed sitting in a car." So we got out of the car, and we kind of got back to back. So we had we could only see 180 really, because the wall, but we got back to back, and our counterpart was right there with us, sort of trying to halfway watch our 6. And they said the only reason that they think that we didn't get killed is because it was a bunch of white people. They thought it was another gang coming in there to steal their drugs, but when they saw a bunch of white faces, they knew something different was up, and that's why they didn't start shooting. So I was like, "Oh, that's great to know."
Oh, wow, wow. It's crazy. When I was in Tivoli Gardens, I mean, just quick little thing. I remember there was, we were white, and these kids, there was regions where it was such poverty that these kids started running up to me, and they thought I was painted white. They didn't believe that I'm a white guy. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why? They kept doing this. And I'm like, oh, that's cute. They're like kind of petting me like I'm a furry animal. And then one of the gangster liaisons were like, yeah, they've never seen white people over here. And it was
That's
that
so,
poor. I mean,
that's
yeah,
wild. Yeah.
yeah. You were mentioning something about the shoe. I'd love to hear that story. It's the shoe being tossed at Bush in Iraq.
Yeah, for those of you that are too young to remember this, you could Google it. He was doing a little press conference in a teeny tiny room, just speaking, and one of the press guys was I think it was a Baathist supporter, something like that. I think he was part of the Baath party or whatever, and that's a huge insult. Like he took his shoe off and threw his shoe at Trump to insult him, and he not only threw one, but he threw two. Of course, George W. Bush ducked. It's kind of funny to go back and YouTube it. You can see him kind of ducking out of the way. Pretty good reflexes for an older guy. But what the funny story I wanted to tell was they were so embarrassed by that they grabbed the guy. Now I wasn't there. I was in Afghanistan waiting for him to come to me. But of course, when we all got on the plane to come home together, I heard the story, and they basically hog-tied this dude, literally hog-tied him with his hands and feet behind his back, carried him down. They were going to throw him into the river. I think it's the Euphrates. I'm not sure if that's right, but they were going to throw him into the river. And the site agent for that site, this guy named Colin, God rest his soul, he passed away a few years ago of cancer, just a gigantic human being. Like Colin was like 6'4", 260, solid muscle. Had it not been for that, they probably wouldn't have listened to him because he was like a giant. And they were going to throw this dude in the river, and Colin basically begged them not to kill the guy. And so they didn't, but they beat the crap out of him. They were going to kill him. They're going to throw him in the river.
Wow, wow, that's
Bow
interesting.
and bear. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow. So take me through, the next person of note that you're helping oversee.
Yeah. So let's see. So wrapped up my time in D.C. with George W. Bush. I did have the pleasure of taking his father, George H.W. Bush, to Kuwait one time when I was on the CAT team. Got to do a lot of cool stuff when I was on the CAT team. Took his dad. We lovingly referred to them as 41 and 43. Not no disrespect meant, but when you say George Bush, you didn't want to say George H.W. Bush or George W. Bush, so we would just call him 41 and 43. So I got to take 41 to Kuwait. Bumped into Oliver North while I was there. Had a beer with him. That was really cool. Got some really cool experiences like that. I got to do some stuff with Bill Clinton when I was stationed in London, because London is, as you know, is a hub, a major hub for world economic things. And I think we covered seven countries out of London, one of which was Shannon, Ireland. So I did a lot of refuels over there. Obama, let's see, was it Obama? Not yet. I guess it was Bush. Yeah, it was Bush and Clinton through there. Yeah, because Obama was sitting president. So it was Clinton and Bush coming through there a lot for refuels. I can remember Clinton coming through London a lot. He was always flying on the Google jet, which appeared to be pretty nice from the outside. Doing a lot of things with him. Did some things with, I didn't necessarily do anything directly with the Queen, but Obama did come over for a state visit and spent, I don't know if you guys remember, but the volcanoes that were erupting in, was it Greenland or Iceland? The volcanoes were
Mhm,
erupting. The ash was in the air. So
mhm.
he was supposed to spend one night in Ireland and then 2 nights in England or something like that. But he ended up not spending the night in Ireland and ended up spending like 3 nights, I think, in London at the palace. So, that was a cool experience to get to witness a sitting president, visiting the sitting Queen of England. Um,
Mhm,
and that was always, I became really good friends with they call them the Beefeaters, the Queen's Guard. Uh,
mm.
got to hang out with those guys a lot. I'm still friends with those guys. Made some lifelong friends when I was living in London. Would go down to the Tower of London and watched them do the ceremony of the keys. They still do the ceremony of the keys every single night. They even did it every single, I think they missed one night during World War II because something was on fire, but for hundreds of years, they've done the ceremony of the keys because they used to legitimately lock up the tower at night, back, hundreds of years ago, and used to get invited into their private pub and have some drinks and just salt of the earth people, man. My time in London was just so amazing.
So tell me, Obama, like working with Obama, what was your experiences like? What, his personality, what you think about him? What are some of the things you saw working with him?
Yeah. So I get this question a lot. Like, my career path had nothing to do with who was in office. Like, so it's just timing, right? So I went to DC in March of 03 and left in January of 09 because I was on orders to go overseas. So I was with Bush for 5 years and 10 months. I was with Obama for 2 days. So the only thing I did with Obama was, of course, everybody knows the night you get sworn in, the day you get sworn in, there's a bunch of galas that night. Presidents usually hit about 10 galas, I think it is. They'll pop in and do a dance, maybe make 10 or 15 minutes worth of remarks and then bounce to the next one. So the January the 20th inauguration day is a super busy day for everybody. And so he came to the DC Armory, and it was like a 10,000 person ticketed event that I was in charge of. And so I can remember, I had just spent 5 years and 10 months with this 60-something-year-old white dude. And now in walks, I don't even know how old he was at the time, 40-something-year-old African-American guy. It was just like, it was just totally different. And what I mean by that is, like, Jay-Z and Beyonce were backstage and there was hip hop playing. And it was like, we went from listening to, George Strait to Jay-Z. It was just like, it was just different. I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying it was different. And so I only was really around him for 2 days because, like I said, I was on orders to fly out to London to my next assignment. Again, just timing. So I didn't have a ton of interaction with him as a sitting president, but I will say, and I don't agree with him politically on pretty much anything, but I will say that my friends that were there said he was very nice, very cordial, was always nice to the troops, to the men and the women, that I worked with. And I can attest to that because when I was years later assigned to the Honolulu field office, of course, he has a house. I don't know if you guys know, but he bought the old Magnum PI house from the TV show Magnum PI from the 80s. And he has an awesome house on Honolulu, outside of Honolulu. It's on the windward side of the island over at Waimanala. It is my favorite beach in the whole world. And that dude's got a house right on the beach. I'm like, it's freaking awesome. So he would come over there for Christmas and stuff and play golf. And his house was under construction for a few years. And now I'm sure it's finished now and they're living, they bounce around. But any interaction I had with him was like sort of limited because I was kind of like the field office supervisor. I would be in proximity, like, if he's putting, I'd be kind of standing near the green or whatever. But, I never said I can't sit here and say I had a conversation with the man because that would be a bridge too far. But I was near him and around him, never witnessed anything vulgar or, he was always a gentleman when I was around him. He just was. Now, can't say that about every protectee. Mrs. Clinton was not the nicest for sure.
I knew you're going to bring this up, by the way, man. You know, it's funny. Every single person I've talked with that has had an interaction, I've heard, and they can't talk too
I'm not going to
much,
say
but
much. She was not.
I've rarely heard a positive word. But anyway, go right ahead.
I don't want to say. Listen, man, there's no point in, there's no reason to beat a dead horse. And I wasn't with her on a daily basis, so I can't speak. Now, if I had witnessed things, I would be more than happy to. Look, I call balls and strikes. That's what I say on my podcast. We call balls and strikes. I have no problem doing that. I never witnessed anything bad with Obama. I never witnessed anything bad with Bush. I really never witnessed anything crazy with Clinton. Clinton is like a gregarious guy. I mean, he's larger than life. And when he walks in the room, you can just feel the energy. That dude exudes energy, right? So, but Hillary, not super friendly, whatever. We were the help. it was very clear that we were the help, no problem. So I just tried to stay clear. I don't want to beat her up, but everybody knows.
I mean, you're talking about like just what I've heard. Let me tell you what I've heard, and tell me if this is similar. Just like vulgar, kind of like snappy, rude, very cursy. I mean, is this
Yeah, like
in the right
yeah.
ballpark?
Why are you going this way? Why are you turning? And it didn't
Mhm.
happen to me because again, it's he said, she said, like it's third person. But like I have friends that were on her details, but especially I was such a young agent when they were in office. I can't speak to anything other than the rumors that I've heard about her getting mad at him and throwing the clock at him and whatever with the
Mhm.
Lewinsky stuff. I wasn't there for that. I was in the Charlotte field office. I was a young guy, but my stories, mostly around them as former president, and mostly it's hearsay from buddies of mine that were stationed up there with them in Chappaqua. Just little things like being real, you know, snippety or curt, however you want to say it, just kind of rude. Like why are you going this way? Don't you know this way's faster? Just stupid first world nonsense. It doesn't make a hill of beans, but just not 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 like I would say up until Trump. When I protected Trump, of course, Eric and Laura are my favorite protectees of all time because I was their detail leader and I was with them every freaking day. I didn't watch, but I was standing outside the hospital room when Luke was born. So they're dear friends of mine that I still stay in touch with to this day. So Eric and Laura are my number one seed. Of course, I'm a big 47 guy too. But up until that point, Mrs. Bush, Laura Bush's 43's wife, was my favorite protectee because she was so sweet. I mean, she was a librarian, and she was just sweet and kind. And did you guys get something to eat? It's cold out here. Don't you need a coat? Just kind of just like a grandmother, like a young type grandmother, a mother figure, just a super nice lady. And let's just say that Mrs. Clinton was not Mrs. Bush. That's all. That's all.
So, Michelle, did you have any? We didn't talk about Michelle Obama. Do you have any
No,
interaction with
not
her?
really. I mean, a little bit. Like I said, my interactions with the Obamas was only like in a 2-year window when I was stationed in Honolulu because they would come over for like a month or so for Christmas, and I was mostly with him, because I was the field office supervisor, so I was with him doing golf or whatever. He would golf just about every day. I think about every day, and she would go on hikes and different
Mhm.
things. So there was a couple of times that when he wasn't doing stuff, he was at the house because no offense, but he's the priority, right? So if he was at the house, kind of locked down, I would have an opportunity to go with the guys that I was friends with on her detail and kind of catch up on old times and she would go on a hike or something like that, and that was always kind of nice. They're very outdoorsy type people too. A little bit different than Bush because Bush was out cutting wood and kind of being a almost like a farmer type. But they were very active, kayaking and on the water and hiking and playing golf. But I wasn't around her a ton. But when I was, I mean, I didn't have any real interaction with her because, like I said, she was with her girlfriends or whatever, and they were hiking and doing their thing, and we were just there in a working capacity. But no, I can't say anything negative. Uh, Again, if I had witnessed something, I would 100% spill the beans. But they were always professional to me.
So now we're in the Trump administration, and you're working with Don Jr. and
Yep. So my butt. So I
what?
got I was assigned to Eric Trump and my buddy Al Story, he was my first interviewee uh, on my podcast. Al Story, you might like to talk to him sometime. He's an awesome guy. Al was Don's detail leader, and I was Eric's detail leader. So Al and I worked together a lot at Trump Tower. We were on a TDY, temporary duty assignment up there for I think Al did about 2 years. I did 15 months with Eric, and just salt to the earth, man. The thing I always said about it, I don't care if you like Trump. I don't care if you like Obama. I don't care who you like or who you don't like. But what I never could figure out is, when Obama was in office, I didn't care for his politics super much, right? But I didn't feel the need to tell everybody. But as soon as Trump got in, by God, everybody's letting you know how much they hate him. I'm like, dude, I don't. Why are you putting so much emphasis on this one guy? This guy doesn't really make or break my day. Sure, it's nice to have Trump back in the Oval versus Biden for sure, but Biden had dementia. Let's be honest. So I mean, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I don't really care, but I just never could quite wrap my head around the venomous vitriol that people have for this guy. And I thought Trump derangement syndrome was just kind of a buzz phrase, but it's actually a real thing. I mean, we witnessed it last night on the what do you call it? The State of the Union. The Democrats wouldn't even clap for a 13-year-old boy with brain cancer. They wouldn't clap for the widow of an officer, or the mothers and sisters of slain girls. I mean, they're just full of hate, man. And not all of them, not all, but they seem like they're just full of hate. And I just don't understand why people are against this guy so much. And I think what I'm trying to say, and I don't think I'm doing a good job of articulating what I'm actually trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is, I know what I know because I've seen behind the curtain. I've been in the White House with Trump. Not every day because I was with Eric, but when we would come down, I would watch Eric interact with his dad, and I would be standing there listening to him talk. Obviously not trying to eavesdrop, but you're in the same freaking room. And the first time we went down there to the White House in early 2017, I think it was probably February of 17, maybe March of 17. Eric was talking to his dad, and he's like, "I want to introduce you to my guy." Well, I had never been introduced to a president. I mean, I used to work Bush every day, but I didn't talk to the guy unless he talked to me, which he did some, but not much. He's trying to run the country, and I'm there to protect him. I'm not there to be friends with the guy. And it was just awkward because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to talk to him or not. And so I looked at my boss, and he gave me the nod like it was okay, because my protectee is trying to introduce me to the leader of the free world, and I'm scared to go talk to the guy because I don't want to get in trouble. And he's like, "Hey, Dad, this is my guy, Scott, blah, blah, blah." And then he couldn't have been nicer. He was like, "Hey, you going to take care of my boy?" And I said, that's exactly what he said. "You going to take care of my boy?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Okay, he's a good man. Take care of him." And then we chit chat for a minute. I don't even really remember much of the conversation. I do remember him asking me if I was going to take care of his son. And I said, yes. It was just a humbling moment, and that's the way what you see on cameras, what is off camera. Like, he's not putting on a show. Yeah, he's a little bit of a showman back in the day with his show that he had, the what do you call it, The Apprentice or whatever. I understand, a little bit of a showman then, but he loves our country. He loves his family. I think he loves the Lord. I hope he does. I think the Lord spared his life on July 13th for sure. So if he wasn't a Christian then, maybe he is now. I don't know. That's up to him and God. That ain't up to me. But he's a patriot that loves his country, and he's trying to do the best that he knows how. And people just, no matter, he said it great last night. No matter what he does, they're not going to like him. He could cure cancer and they wouldn't like him. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. So you work with Eric Trump, and then subsequent to that, you retired, or?
Yeah, so I worked with Eric. Awesome human being. Man, it's just an amazing human being.
It's funny you say that, because my interaction with him, because I used to go to Reawaken America quite a bit. I went to almost every single one the last 3 years or so. And I was kind of shocked, because I remember one time, we met briefly, just, did a quick little interview. And I remember, we were kind of hanging out at the end of this hall, and there's another big hall that crosses over, kind of like a T shape, right? And he's passing through the hall. He stops, comes up to us, says, "What's up, guys? And you guys doing okay?" We're like, "Yeah, yeah." And then he's like, "Cool, man." And then he just walks off, and but the fact that he took the time to come and say hello to us, he always, like, I don't know, I always got this sense that he's how they say, like, the most unlikely people end up in positions of power, like, that don't want that power. I was like, wow, man, this guy actually, regardless of all that SNL crap where they try to make fun of him and all that and try to make him seem, not very smart and stuff, like, he was actually really smart, really charming. And I thought, man, this guy actually could one day be president. That's the vibe that I got just hanging out with him, because of his personality.
So good. I'll brag on him to his face. I'm like, "You're one of the nicest human beings I've ever met." And he's in the hospitality business, so I think it just comes natural to him. Now, I will say, his brother's not the same way. I like Don Jr. just fine too. So I'm not. I would. What I'm about to say, I've said to Don privately, so I'm not dogging him out. But one day I was in his office up there in Trump Tower, and we were talking about something. And I said, it's a good thing the service finally got something right, because I have Don's personality is very like mine. Like, we're very edgy. If it's in our brain, it's coming out of our mouth. So like Eric's very low key, cool and calm. Al is the same way. Al is a very low key guy. So they put opposing personalities together. So they put Al with Don and they put me with Eric, which was a good thing. And I said to Don one day, I said, it's a good thing that Al's your guy, not me. And because Al's personality is just laid back. And he said, yeah, I know, because I would fire you. And he was joking. And I said, no, you wouldn't, because I'd quit. He's very edgy. He's out there doing his thing. He's the older brother, but it's like Eric is just steady. Like, if they were football players, which neither one of them are, okay, but like if they were football players, Eric would be the quarterback and Don would be like a linebacker or a free safety, because he's a headhunter, right? Eric's just steady. Both, I like both guys a lot, but Eric is running that company, best I can tell, and just a good dude.
Wow. So tell me, I mean, now that you're retired, how do you sum up your experience as a Secret Service? I mean, it almost is like a charmed life, going through those experiences and traveling the world and, seeing so many presidents so closely. I mean, how do you sum all that up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I've been blessed. Like I said, I was a police officer. I knew I wanted to get into Secret Service in college. I kind of had this epiphany that it's a long story for another time, but I decided I wanted to try to do something that not many people get to do. And so I did, and it worked out. And, I think for me, the divorce rate's really high with the Secret Service. And so for me, my wife gets a ton of credit because she stayed home and kept the house in order. And I have 3 children; they're grown now, but she kept the home fires burning and she took care of the babies. And I could not have done that job without her. I want to make sure I give her credit, because she's a godly woman, and she kept us together. She kept it together. Also, my faith in God, I think, definitely played a role in my success. I think, what did happen though is you get to do a lot and see a lot, and it becomes the unusual kind of becomes normal, and it's like not everybody reports to work at the White House every day. So after a while, you kind of become numb to it, and it's just really hard to move the needle. Like, once upon a time when I was growing up and before I was a Secret Service agent, like I would get, I want to meet Michael Jordan, or Tom Cruise, or whatever. I'm just making up name, but like you get real excited about, if you had a chance to go meet some dude. No disrespect, but like I don't get impressed much anymore. It's hard to impress me, as far as that kind of stuff goes. And I know I'm jaded because I got to do a lot and see a lot. But and I don't mean that to come. I hope that didn't come across as pious or weird.
No, it's funny, man. I feel what you're saying, because somebody yesterday, I've been very fortunate from a very young age. I had success, with directing, and I met a lot of celebrities. And somebody was asking me yesterday, where I was talking about meeting Donald Trump, President Trump again, I would say, because this would be, I don't know. I mean, in terms of very small interactions, I mean, we're like at a half dozen at this point, dating back to 98, and they're asking me, would you be nervous if you saw him again? And I said, I don't get nervous with celebrities, but maybe Donald Trump. But if it's Tom Cruise or anyone, I grew up around that. You know what I mean? I don't want to sound pious or arrogant or whatever, but when and what's the funny thing about a lot of these guys? I think treating them, and I'm talking about celebrities, people that have, fame, fortune, whatever. It seems as though the more normal you are with them, like you're not like, oh, hello, sir, whatever. You're kind of like, just treat them like a regular person. They appreciate that, and they seem to open up to you, and they feel more comfortable when you just treat them like a regular dude, obviously respectfully, but, just treat them like a regular
No, I
person.
think that's exactly right. I mean, a prime example of that for me what was the Bush girls and the Obama girls. Now, the Obama girls were a little bit younger when he took office, right? But so the Bush girls were, I think, in high school and college back then. Um, and then the Obama girls were like grade school, middle school, grade school, whatever, high school, and then on to college. But the Trump family was totally different because you're protecting grown adult, 35-year-old men or 40-year-old men. It's a little different. But like, just I watched the interaction with some of my colleagues with the Bush girls and the Obama girls, and the guys that just talked to them almost like an uncle, or they're not quite old enough to be their dad, but like, a big brother or an uncle, and just held them accountable and didn't kiss their ass. And, basically, hey, we're not doing that. And as long as you could articulate, wow, they respected it. But the guys that treated them like robots and were like, I'm scared to talk to you. Like it's a freaking 19-year-old girl. Dude, you're 35. Act like it. Those girls took advantage of the robot type dudes, and the guys that were just not mean to them, but firm, right? Firm but fair. They gravitated toward those guys because they didn't treat them like they were princesses. They were there to keep them alive for sure, but they didn't kiss their butt, and I think they definitely appreciated that.
Wow, man, this is so fascinating. I'm curious, are you ever thinking about writing a memoir of your experiences,
Man, my
or?
wife wants me to write like you listen, dude. I don't want to write a book. I started a podcast. You know that. I feel like I'm trying to figure out the next chapter of my life. I enjoy doing this type of stuff. I might write a book someday. Maybe I think my wife and I had talked about maybe doing like instead of a Secret Service book, maybe doing like a self-help book to talk about marriage and
Mhm,
how to. Because listen, man, marriage is hard, right? It's ups and downs, and we've had our ups and downs. I mean, mostly
mhm.
because I'm a knuckle dragger, right? Not because of her, but men and women are just different, and marriage is hard no matter what job you have. And then you have a job like this or a job in the military; it's very hard to keep it together. So I think we've talked about maybe trying to incorporate our faith or something, and writing a book on self help, and maybe just try to how to help people navigate marriage. But yeah, she's told me for a long time I need to write a book, but I'm just not. This is the first interview I've ever done talking about my career. I don't think I've done this one,
Oh,
and
wow.
I don't. I feel a little odd. Like I like watching the Sean Ryan
Mhm.
show with different. And I love listening to people talk about their careers. It just feels a little weird to do it from my perspective because I just feel like it's, hey, look at me, and I don't like doing that, but.
Let me ask you, like, your podcast, what's your ultimate goal with it? What kind of stuff are you looking to cover in your podcast, just in
Yeah,
general?
that's a good question. I think I started off like for 25 years, I couldn't really say a whole lot because of the Hatch Act. I just couldn't get a lot of stuff off my chest. I went through the pandemic like everybody else. I'm not vaccinated. So I went through some turbulent times toward the end of my career where they tried to fire me because I wouldn't take the jab. So I just want to speak truth to power is kind of my mantra. I think kind of what I'm going for. And until I can kind of get my legs under me, it's sort of a combination of like the Bongino show where he talks about current events and politics, geopolitical stuff, and then like a Sean Ryan thing or like yours, like where you're interviewing people. I really just want to try to interview as many people as I can and just tell stories that I think people would be interested in. And then I think, again, not to harp on my faith, but I do want to try to use my faith. I'm not going to just do a religious podcast on Christianity because I don't think people would probably watch that. But I want to incorporate my faith into certain aspects of different things and hopefully just spread a little good news because the world is such a dark place. I'm just trying to spread a little light, man.
You know what I thought was a really cool idea, which I think you were getting at in terms of a book, like a self-help book, is it sounds like your Christianity had a lot to do with it, and your wife as well, of keeping the family together through, a challenging job you have, is that kind of on point with what you're looking to potentially
Yeah,
do?
yeah, absolutely. I think we're both strong believers. our children are all saved. And I know everybody watching this is not, and that's fine. I'm not trying to be preachy or judgy or anything like that, because that does not really, you get more bees with honey than you do vinegar, right? But I just want to,
Mhm.
I feel like, and I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want it to come across wrong. Like I don't consider, like, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I wasn't a pro athlete, but I do have this niche that not a lot of people. I feel like I have a platform that might give me a little street cred, maybe. And if I could
Mm.
somehow use my platform and talk about the good and the bad, and like learn, like, I like to learn from my mistakes, but I also like to learn from the mistakes of others so that I don't do those, right? So if I could just at some point help somebody somewhere. I just want to help people. If I know that sounds a little cliche, but I've been a civil servant for 30 years. All I know is, service, right? And I'm not trying to sound holier than thou, because I'm not. But I just really want to help. I mean, I'm also a high school football coach. I like pouring into people and trying to help cultivate them and turn young men into actual productive citizens, And I'm just taking that mindset and trying to put it into my podcast.
I mean, that's a worthy endeavor because I think a lot of men are lost. You obviously have, like, masculine energy. You have the right kind of masculine energy. It's not it's a Christ-like masculine energy. And I think that's very important, especially in today's day and age where it seems like, a lot of young people are lost. A lot of young people are, I mean, that's the world I came from. That's why I made the transition, because I spent, 10 years directing music videos, the most foul lyrics on the planet, talking about promiscuity, drugs, just gluttony at its worst, right? And then you see how that's manifested itself in the current generation. I mean, you have certain sectors of society that have just fallen prey to sex, drugs, and violence. And, seeing how that was affecting our kids. There just seems to be a lot of toxicity and, a lot of fatherlessness in this country, and seems like that Christ-like masculine energy is very
Yeah.
important right now.
No, I think you're right. I mean, what's the term they say? Toxic masculinity. I'm like, come on, dude. Like, really? It's like as soon as you
Yeah,
disagree with
yeah.
someone, you call them a racist or a hypocrite or a bigot
Mhm,
or a xenophobe, or you have toxic masculinity. Like, what the heck is that? Like, quit
mhm.
making up crap. It's just like, we can agree to
Yeah,
disagree, no problem. But like, as soon as people resort to name calling, you've won the argument. Get out of here, Booney. Come here. Sorry, my little Jack Russell's he's my
yeah.
little shit.
No, no worries, no worries. I mean, it seems as though, like, look, you're bringing up how they keep beating up on the Trump family, Donald Trump, his children. It seems as though one of the reasons why they keep at him the way they do, much more so than any other president, is because he is, a masculine man that has his own mind, and he's not controllable, and he's not going to be part of their agenda and say words like toxic masculinity and pronouns like they, them, and the 73 genders. That seems to be a big threat to them. The fact that somebody's willing to hold strong with their values, whether you call it Christian values or American values, that seems to be the big
Yeah,
threat
no,
to them.
100%. We watched it last night unfold. We already talked about it a little bit here. It's like,
Mhm.
how in the world, like, you don't like Trump? I get it. I don't give a rip if you do or don't. I'm not a Trump apologist. I don't care if you like the man or not. I don't worship Trump. I support Trump. I don't worship him. I mean, I just
Yeah.
their cheap throwaway talking points are so. It's just so I don't want to say uneducated, but uninformed. It's just tired. It's like, how in the world can you sit there cross-armed, stone-faced, and not clap? So maybe you disagree with what's the swimmer's name that was on there last night? Oh gosh, Riley Gaines.
Right.
So you okay? So
Riley, Riley. Yeah.
once upon a time you were all about Title IX and women's rights and believe all women, right? When Kavanaugh was getting sworn,
Hmm.
believe all women. Hashtag Me Too. Really? But now you don't.
Yeah.
But so you don't agree with Title IX. Okay, you're wrong, I think, but fine. I'll give you that. Who cares?
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, when you have two mothers sitting up there, their daughters were raped and killed, and you can't celebrate them and clap for them and be, you could see the torture in those women's faces, that their eyes, I mean, you could see into their soul. I mean, the agony in their face was just, it's hard to watch. And then the little boy,
Yeah.
the little boy that wants to be a police officer, they made him an honorary Secret Service. How can you not clap for that kid? What's wrong? There's something
Yeah,
wrong with
yeah,
him, man. It's mental
yeah.
illness.
It's mental illness, and it makes them look really bad. It makes them look very sympathetic. And honestly, I think they lost. I think they lost 26 and
Yeah.
28 yesterday. I really do. I really do. I think people that saw that, I think we might have like a couple of decades of Republican
Man.
presidencies because of what they
Well,
did. As long as if we get, I mean, obviously we get Dan Quayle out there that doesn't know how to put a sentence together,
right.
that's not going to work. But you have somebody articulate. I mean, JD Vance. I like Trump,
Uh,
but
I,
like JD Vance is a poet
uh,
the way he knows how to use words and like in a very soft spoken way, but yet masculine energy and his eye, the way I mean, just his like the way he looks at people and reacts
yeah.
is like I mean that's meme worthy
Yeah.
stuff right there. It's like the adult in the
No, it's
room,
great. And I think it's nice to have a little younger blood in the room too, right? So it's like, we
Hmm.
talked about this on my podcast the other day. It's like, I think there should be term limits for these congressmen and senators too, by the way, like
Hmm.
maybe 8, 12, what, I don't care what the number is, but
Yeah.
like not 50 years, and I just think it's a refreshing to see like the other day when they had Zelensky in the Oval Office, like JD. I feel like JD's the one that got Trump fired up. JD was preaching a little bit, and he wasn't playing with Zelensky,
Hmm.
and then Trump got fired
No.
up. So it's like it's nice to see that he's got that bravado in him, but it's also controlled,
Hmm.
right? It's not like so brash. Like
Yeah.
I'm a big Trump guy, but Trump, especially in his last term, he would just say some crazy stuff, and not saying he was wrong, but sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and that
It's
seems to rub
exactly,
people
yeah.
wrong. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, you elected a billionaire from New York. What did you think you were going to get? But
Hmm.
regardless of that, it's nice, it's refreshing to me to have a guy who's in the room, who's articulate, a little bit younger, extremely smart and well spoken, and he doesn't play games.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, totally, man. Yeah, this is awesome. I really appreciate this, Scott. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that's worth talking about before we
I
wrap up
mean,
this episode?
there's so much. It's hard to wrap. It's hard to do 25 years in an hour or whatever we've been talking. But I would like to just say that one of the things that the reason I left the service was you asked me what happened after the Trump detail. I was on PPD. Sorry, Presidential Protective Division. Everything in the government's got acronyms. So I did 9 years of my 25 years on permanent protection, Presidential Protective Division, which was the highlight of my career. But I'm sure it also took years off of my life because it's extremely stressful. I mean, I hate to sound cliche, but it's like a zero fail mission. Of course, July 13th we didn't talk about, which is a complete debacle. And I felt like I had a gut. I mean, I'd been gone for 2 years, but I was like, God bless. I wish I would have been working. And we could talk about that some other time. And then,
Yeah, you know what? Actually, let us talk about that. Tell me about July
yeah, it was
13th.
bullshit, dude. I mean, it's like my wife's gonna be mad I said that. Sorry, sweetie. Um, I'm trying to work on my language. I've been doing a lot better. But you know, I ran our surveillance. Well, I was a part of our surveillance unit for 4.5 years, and I pretty much ran it for 2 of those years basically as like an NCO. It's the best way I know how to describe the Secret Service. I was not officially a supervisor, but I had supervisor responsibility. So it's basically like an NCO, non-commissioned officer. And then so I had a lot of experience doing surveillance. Then I came back and ran it for a year as like basically an officer would do in the military. And they didn't have that asset. Now you have to also remember that a former president, doesn't get the assets that a sitting POTUS gets. Like POTUS gets the most, and we all know that. And then VP and blah blah blah. But Trump was not just a former president. Okay, this isn't like you know Jimmy Carter or Clinton or Bush that have been out of office for years. This guy's fresh out of office, and he's got a high threat level on him. Oh, and by the way, he's the candidate running for office. So in my humble opinion, and it's hard to get people to talk. I still am obviously friends with guys on the job. I've only been gone for just over 2 years. I'm still in touch with a lot of guys on the job. Nobody wants to say a whole lot, and I understand they're a little scared to talk, but I know what I know because I did the job. And if they would have had a surveillance team or teams, I'm not going to talk about numbers, but if they would have had counter surveillance teams, plural, working that day, no chance that would have happened, because the CSU guys would have found the guy and either arrested him or killed him, and they'd be heroes, but they weren't there, and it's bullcrap.
Wow. Is there more you want to talk
I
about
could
that
talk on this
topic, or?
for 2 hours, but I mean, it's like, DEI had a part to do with it. I hate to even bring that up, but if I'm going to say I call balls and strikes, then I got to call balls and strikes. And I've been hard on the service. Some of my first not my podcast, but some of my shorts, I do little shorts for Instagram and TikTok. I was all over the Secret Service. I spent 25 years of my life. I gave 25 good years of my life to that profession, and it's hard to throw stones at an agency where I'm like, did I waste my whole life? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. But it's sometimes we just.
I mean, what happened there? Like, it's just insane to me that, like, sloped roof, we can't get guy. I mean, what is all that nonsense about? I mean, it seems very
Well, you know
willful,
what it is.
actually.
Okay, first of all, the deep state's a real thing. Let's call it what it is. The deep state's a real thing. No, I don't think the Secret Service was involved. Okay, I've been asked that. You didn't ask me that, but people have. No, I don't. And I can't get into the details because I can't give away trade craft. But like, for the Secret Service to have had involvement in that, it would take so much planning, and now I could be proved to be wrong someday, but I'll go to, and I argued a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I argued with Eric and Don about this. Both of those guys were pissed, as they should be. Their dad got shot in the freaking head. And they're like, this is an inside job, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, it's not a Secret Service job. I don't think. I think it's a deep state job. Now, did the agency have something to do with it? Did the Bureau? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know, but I have an opinion, and my opinion is they wanted to, like, they impeached him twice. They indicted him. They raided his home. Tucker Carlson said it. I was saying, like, I'm no Tucker Carlson, but I was screaming at the TV. They're gonna try to kill this guy. That's the next thing. They're gonna try to kill him. My wife and I would talk about that every night. Like, oh my God, they're going to try to kill this guy. And I hate to say it, but we were right. Sometimes you want to be wrong about this stuff, but like the sloped roof and all that bull crap. That's Julie Pearson, who, by the way, was a supervisor on Biden's detail. She was a GS-15 on Biden's detail when he was the VP. So why do you think she got that job? She's not more, my 24-year-old's got more qualifications to do that job than she does. I mean, she got it because of DEI. Let's call it what it is. It's called nepotism. She was friends with Biden, and he wanted to say he put a woman in as Secret Service director. I think she was the second female. And by the way, I have female agent friends of mine that would be very good at that job. So I'm not a sexist, but it's like, back in the day when people would criticize Obama for his politics, like, oh, you're just racist. No, I'm not racist. He's terrible at his job. So they throw these taglines on, no one wants to be called a racist. So people that aren't like you and me shut up, but people like me and you don't shut up, and they don't like that. So, Julie, is it Julie Pearson? I'm getting them confused. I think it was Julie Pearson, but she was the director at the time. I mean, the slope was like, it was almost flat. So that's just embarrassing. Just, the buck's got to stop with somebody. And, she's the director and she wasn't there. And I get that. But she's got to take it on the chin, and she's just got to apologize and fall on the sword. But you start making excuses, it just makes it way worse. It's embarrassing. It's freaking embarrassing. For me, I was embarrassed. I'm like, I don't even want to tell people I'm a retired agent. Like, it was embarrassing.
I mean, DEI just destroys everything, and being in the Hollywood world, I remember when the DEI stuff came to a network that I was hired to help run. And I mean, this is literal, they replaced all the professionals with purple-haired people, resulted in them burning through $300 million, driving the business to bankruptcy because they wanted to do this woke DEI thing. And it just some of the stupidest things I've seen, even the Oscars, for example, a few nights ago, there was the Oscars. I looked back at 1995, the viewership in 1995, when the population was less, was 48 million. This year, 18 million. So they lost about 70% or more of their market share. And Then I go on my Facebook, which is still populated by a bunch of Hollywood people because, a lot of them dropped me when I started talking smack about the COVID vaccine. They all said that I'm crazy domestic terrorist, crazy MAGA guy. And, but, a lot of them are still on my Facebook page and they are still talking the same nonsense. I'm like, you guys are literally inches away from driving your entire business into bankruptcy. Most of you guys, I don't know what jobs you're going to get, in your 40s and 50s now, but nonetheless, they are still, TDS woke, and they're losing. I mean, they're like 2-3 years away from literally us, meaning the freedom people, patriots, capturing the mainstream media completely. And I don't understand the logic of it. It's like suicide on the installment plan before my eyes.
I don't think they understand what there's two things. They don't understand what the definition of insanity is, right? Trying the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And they wouldn't know irony if it bit them
Mhm.
in the butt. They just don't understand irony at all. But like, again, not
Yeah.
to beat up on the little young girl that was out there at the Trump thing, but the girl that kept having a hard time getting her gun in her holster, you know,
Mhm.
I don't know if this is true, but I was told that she was like, that was her site or she was the lead for that thing. I don't know. But I'm like, God, but I don't care if you're black or white, green or purple, man or woman. Are you capable? Like the standard is the standard. If you can meet the standard, like, so let's say
Yeah.
you can go to Buds. Here's the standard for Buds. If
Mhm.
you're a dude, here's the standard. If you're a chick, here's the standard. You're not going to do girl push-ups. You're going to do push-ups. And if you can make it through Buds, then you can become a SEAL, even if you're a freaking woman, right? So it's like the standard has got to remain high. And I think what's happened is, for whatever reason, I don't, it's a head scratcher. It's like we have lowered, certain places haven't, but some places have, and the service is definitely guilty of it. Uh, Director Pearson, I want to make sure I'm saying the right one. I think it was Julie Pearson, said that she had a plan. This is before she, basically resigned. She wanted to have 30% of the workplace be females by 2030. I'm like, what? Okay, like, but that's a male, that's a predominantly male driven workforce, right? Law enforcement's predominantly male, right? And by the way, there's called a majority for a reason, and there's called a minority for a reason. Like, there's just more white dudes that want to go do that than there are anything else. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's numbers. That's why I love math. It's just a percentage. And why are you driving this train into the ground to try to hire 30? Like, I have 2 sons and a daughter. My daughter's not interested in doing that job, but like, I would push my sons toward it before I would push her. There's just certain, and it sounds sexist and it might rub people wrong, and I don't mean for it to, but like, there's just certain jobs that are for certain people, and I don't mean that to be derogatory. Like, I don't, like, if you're flying my airplane, do you think if I care if it's a woman flying the airplane or if she's black or white or gay or straight? I don't care. Does she know how to fly that freaking airplane? And if she does, then hey, let's go. If she doesn't, then I don't want to get on the plane. And I don't think that's asking too much.
Yep. Yep. It's just common sense and logic,
Left it.
really. And we've seen these companies where it's like planes going down, the chopper thing that
Ugh,
happened there with 67 people dying. I mean, it's just
it's crazy.
ridiculous.
And
It's
the
literally
only other
killing
thing I
people.
wanted to touch on really quickly, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to like belabor the point, but is the jab. I call myself a pure blood. It's kind of like a little in-house joke that we had at the Secret Service. My last office, my next to last office, I was in Hawaii. There were 20 of us there, and only 2 of us. I was a supervisor, and of course, supervisors have bosses too. And so my boss, the special agent in charge of the field office, was like, he was on me like white on rice, and I'm like, dude, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, so okay, let's just tap the brakes. Don't start calling me a bunch of names that aren't true. Okay, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just want more
Mm.
information, because once I have it, I can't go back. I just wanted more information. And once they politicize it, that's when I kind of lost interest. I mean, like when Trump was in and he was doing his best to do Operation Warp Speed and try to help. That was the work. Like, Harris was on TV and Biden were on TV saying, "I'll never take a Trump vaccine." As soon as they won, it was the best thing ever. And I'm like, once you guys politicized it, you lost me. It's like when you start trying to politicize science, I'm out.
Yeah, and you're saying that they were basically, I mean, they were threatening you with
Yeah,
losing
I
your
had,
job. I mean, they
yeah,
said they weren't forcing anybody, but that's
no,
forcing people when you're
they're
threatening to lose,
they're full of
yeah,
crap. I was a supervisory
yeah,
special agent. Okay, I was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and we from Hawaii covers like 51 or 52% of the globe. We cover everything from like I think it's Pakistan down to frickin' New Zealand. We have a huge area of responsibility. Huge, right? The whole Pacific realm. I was not allowed to travel. The other supervisor that was my pay grade, GS 14, had retired. Okay, so that left one guy to cover everything because the two guys above me, they had different responsibilities. But as the mid-level supervisor, whatever, I was in charge of staffing all the protective visits throughout the whole AOR, and I was not allowed to travel because I wasn't vaccinated. And the same thing when I went back to Wilmington, I couldn't travel, and I had every Monday I had to take a freaking nose swab. I mean, it's just so. I mean, talk about just being I don't want to say persecuted because persecuted is too far. Like Christians and Jewish people have been persecuted. People are being persecuted, getting their heads cut off for their faith. That's persecution. I didn't experience persecution, but I did experience bias. And it was ridiculous. I had to take a nose swab every. I'm not sick. I have no symptoms. Why do I have to take a nose swab? And first of all, how do you? I just reported to this office. How do you know I'm not vaccinated? Isn't that a HIPAA violation to tell the secretary and it was a small office when I went to Wilmington. I left Hawaii and went to Wilmington. The reason I left Hawaii is because of COVID. I actually took a voluntary downgrade to get the heck back home, back to CONUS. I'm like, I got to get out of here. Things are going south. So at that point in time when we were living in Hawaii, it got so bad toward the end, right before I decided, I'm like, I got to get out of here. We couldn't even go to a restaurant. It was just my wife and I because we were empty nesters. So we were living there. And if you didn't have a vaccine ID card, you couldn't go to a movie. You couldn't go to a restaurant. You could go to the food court at the mall and get food, but you had to take it back. You couldn't sit in the restaurant and eat. You were allowed to go to the grocery store, but right after we left is when they stopped allowing people who were not vaccinated to go to the grocery store. And that's when our friends that lived below us ended up moving to Tennessee. They'd lived there 18 years and they had no intentions on ever leaving. And they ended up moving to Tennessee because don't the only way they could get groceries is to do DoorDash or whatever. And I told my wife, and some people are going to agree with me, and some people are going to think I need to be in a straitjacket. But I think that whole thing was the precursor to the mark of the beast. And no, I'm not calling the jab the mark of the beast. I'm saying it's a precursor because if you didn't have an ID card, you couldn't go fricking buy groceries. Now, it didn't stop you from going to get gas and all that stuff because you're outside, but you couldn't feed your family. You couldn't do certain things. And that is
mhm,
a precursor, my friends, to bending the knee. Okay. And I wouldn't bend the knee, and that pissed them off because I was in such the minority. They're like, literally everybody, everywhere you would look, was wearing a mask. It's 85 degrees in Hawaii, and people are walking around the beach with a mask on. And I'm like, brother, you got a mental illness. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's how far could they push it? And I would take it even a step further, Scott, because I've done a lot of interviews on this podcast. You're saying you're not an anti-vaxxer. I interviewed RFK Jr.'s one of his writing partners named Brian Hooker. He's a 30-year expert, PhD in vaccines, and they wrote a book together called Vax Unvax, which basically analyzes every single vaccine ever, and the net positive results are always less than the net negative, meaning it might help some people, but the negative aspects far outweigh the positive. This is what Brian Hooker and RFK
Yeah.
Jr. say in their book, right? So there's that aspect. The other thing I've heard, and this is pretty crazy, is that it is the mark of the beast in that once you have this stuff in you. I've heard things like they could pump up the 5G and literally cook you, microwave you, and stuff. So,
Yeah.
see, before we've heard about the Epstein stuff. They control people through sexual
Sure.
extortion or whatever, right? And I started listening to this whistleblower, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If we have this stuff inside, and you could actually microwave people when they
Mm.
misbehave, A, isn't that the mark of the beast? And B, isn't that some kind of control mechanism similar to that sort of thing where here's the files of you hanging out with underage girls and you're in a, you got to do what we
Yeah.
say. If somebody told you, hey, you're vaxxed, misbehave and we'll just microwave you, or that's going to happen. Isn't that the same level of control? I mean, these are things that might sound like conspiracy theories and we'll never know for sure because we don't have the evidence, but these are the sort of things we hear on the Blood Money podcast
for sure.
often.
And it's kind of goes to me. I feel like we're trending toward, China with the social credit stuff, right? It's like, well, you can't eat red meat. You're a bad boy. You have a steak. You get a demerit or whatever the case may be. And then you've got Bill Gates out there and Melinda Gates that he's putting nanoparticles in freaking Coca-Cola, which really pisses me off because I love a good fountain Coke. I've tried to cut way back on my sugar intake, but like if I go to the movies, I'm getting a Coke. That's going to happen. But like, according to the internet, and again, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, but do some research. Like Bill Gates, is partnered with Coca-Cola and allegedly they're putting nanoparticles in Coke products. That's not good, man. We're headed in the wrong direction.
And Starbucks coffee. And Starbucks coffee. And by the way, you don't want to hear something. This is going to trip you out, Scott. Okay, so I'm hanging out at CPAC with this health guy, and he says, "Look, man, they're spraying all this stuff that you know how they're like the COVID jab has these particles. Well, apparently they're spraying it in the air." He says, "Check this out." He puts I think it was $50 on my forehead, and it sticks there like a magnet. He's like, "You have this all over your blood." He does it to every single person at the bar. Every single person at the bar sticks to their forehead like a magnet. The $50, and
Yeah, it's
scary
crazy.
stuff.
It's
Scary
so
stuff
scary.
because he says that 100% this
Yeah.
is happening, and you got to detoxify this if you don't want to, have all this nasty
Well,
stuff in
listen,
you.
I'm no human biologist, but I will say this. I'd like to say this to your listeners. If you don't know who Gary Brecka is, I highly recommend you guys looking him up because I've learned a lot from that dude. And I've actually been doing some fasting. I've done some intermittent fasting over the last 5 years,
Mhm.
but I've literally been doing a 48-hour fast for the last 3 weeks. I've been doing 48-hour fasts, and I've been losing some weight. I've been on a health journey since last August anyway. Needed to lose some weight and stuff, cut out a bunch of sugar and all
Mhm.
this other stuff out of my diet. So it's been a slow process, but I've recently started doing some fasting because the research that I've done is not only is it good for your spirit, like the Bible says, Jesus actually says in Matthew
Mhm.
6:34, I think it's like when you fast. So not if you fast, but when you fast. So it's more like an order, right? Like, because I think people way back in the biblical days, I think there was a lot of fasting going on back then for different reasons, prayer and fasting for your spiritual stuff, but then also for your gut health, right? So let's say you're not even religious. Well, you should still do it for your gut health. They say that if you could do a 72-hour fast, that your chances of cancer drops by like 70%. Because the research that I've been doing is talking about cancer is mostly just parasites anyway. And this is all self-induced, just like, Alzheimer's wasn't really a thing until like 1979. And which is basically, if people don't know,
Mhm.
that's just basically stage 3. What do you call it when you have low on insulin?
Oh,
Diabetes. It's
diabetes.
like stage 3 diabetes. That's what they say. And then like
Mhm.
brain
Wow.
70% collect all this stuff. Like I can't wait for RFK to really get cooking, man. He's that
Mhm.
guy. He's a beast, man. He's like 68 years old, and he I love him. He's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely somebody that has the receipts, man, and worthy position that is in. Scott, this is awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on to the Blood Money podcast. Is there anywhere people could find your podcast, and any
Well,
directions you want
yeah.
to give them,
First of
social
all,
media?
thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I love talking to you. I know we just met, but you're real fun to talk to, and I know we're like minded, so that's cool. But
Thank you.
yeah, my you could it's Scott Bryson Beyond the Service, but you could just type in BTS, it'll populate. YouTube is where my podcasts drop. Our episode will drop tomorrow night. I'm not sure what time. We usually drop them between 6:30 and 7:30 Eastern on YouTube, and then of course I'm on Instagram
Mhm.
and TikTok at Scott Bryson BTS.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on to the Blood Money podcast. For the viewers out there, make sure you check out americahappens.com. Check out also my X account at NotVemMiller, where I'm posting stuff nearly on a daily basis. We've been covering a lot of these anti-Doge protests, which have actually been a whole lot of fun. In fact, Scott, one of the things that I'm noticing is the first day I went to one of these anti-Doge protests, it was like 2,000 people. It was like the funding had just got cut. And then cut to a week and a half later, and these protests are like 30, 40 people. And it just dwindling down. It shows you, man, they created a whole leftist movement out of
Oh
paying
yeah,
people to show up. And we've heard a lot about this, people getting Cash App payments on a daily basis to show up somewhere. Well, all that money went away, and these protests, if you check out my X account at Not Them Miller, you're going to be kind of shocked because it's just really pathetic right now. It's almost non-existent, hanging by a thread. I have a feeling a week from now, the next anti-Doge protest will probably have 10 people there. But that's a beautiful thing because the fraud seems to
that's
be going
good.
away.
It's about time.
Yeah. Thank you, viewers, for showing up to this Blood Money episode. I will see you all on the next episode. Take care.